It's the season finale, and in this episode, we're taking some time to answer a few questions from you. Not perfect ones, not polished ones, but real questions. And as you listen, take this moment to stay in a place of curiosity. You might just hear something that speaks directly to you or something that you can share with a friend who may need it. Welcome back to Stay Mindful with Dr. Evelyn Davis. I am Dr. Evelyn Davis, and today we are answering some questions from you and hoping that this helps you to continue to create a path of wellness. It is my hope by answering these questions that you not only get the answers that you're looking for, but also you have a moment to pause and ask yourself some questions that you might not have thought of. Because sometimes what I've recognized is sometimes the answers that we're looking for show up in the conversations that we're willing to have. And when we're not willing to have those, that's when we kind of get stuck. So I would like to start with our first question of the day, which is, how do I know if what I'm feeling or how I'm reacting is part of my mental health struggles or just who I am? And I feel like this is a great question and a great way to start off our questions because this question sits at the center of everything. There's a moment that happens for a lot of people, and that's when they've been feeling kind of off for a while, and it starts to feel less like a season and more like part of who you are or your identity because it's something that becomes a natural response to our everyday situations. And that's when it can get kind of confusing. So, because when feelings have been with you for a while, I feel like you start to begin or you stop questioning it and you start accepting it as part of who you are. It comes in the forms of, that's just who I am. That's just how I think. That's just how I respond to situations. But sometimes what we call personality is actually a pattern and can also be a learned pattern or a learned response to situations. We talked about that a little bit in our episode on intergenerational trauma. And from that episode, we know that these patterns can be shaped from stress, from depression, also from past experiences, and even the messages that we've learned are carried along the way. So, to help you out, I want you to truly take some time to look at your past experiences. And instead of asking, is this who I am? I invite you to ask, what might this response be connected to? Because that question will give you the space to separate yourself from the response and then allow you to truly see if it is a response or if it is something learned, something deeper. Once you do that, there will be a moment, or hopefully there will be a moment where you shift from identity to curiosity. And when you do that, then change can become possible. Also, which I plan to be doing all the way throughout this episode, is encouraging you to also seek more support outside of ourselves, to kind of explore that a little bit deeper. Because when we do that, and it's also just helpful to have someone else to kind of come in and help hold that mirror up to us and also help us walk through that. So I also want to encourage you to do that, to seek support, to see if those responses and those things, and also help you to separate it from yourself. So once you start noticing what those patterns are, that can kind of help you take you to the next step and the next step towards identifying what is truly you and then what is the response to your experiences and the situations that you're in. So I hope that helps. So we'll be going on to the next question now. And this one is around relationships. And this question is, when is the right time to discuss with a romantic partner about mental health issues that I am dealing with? And this question sounds like it's about timing, But most of the time, this question or the answer to this question is actually about safety and safety within yourself and then also with your partner. Because opening up about our mental health can be a big step in a relationship and it requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires trust. And if we're honest, most of us are still learning what safe connection even feels like. If we go back to the episode on the attachment and learning about the RAM on episode 3, in that episode, I talked about the importance of getting to know someone before we get into a stage of being super intimate with people. And I feel like that vulnerability piece comes when it's connected to the intimacy piece of it. And that's why it's important to get to know people before we start to build trust. And it's the same in this situation. Sometimes we feel the urge to share everything very quickly with people because we don't want to feel like we're keeping a secret from our partner. Or it can also be connected to wanting to feel understood within the relationship, letting them know kind of the things that you're feeling. We also want reassurance in our relationships, knowing that the person can kind of be there when we're experiencing these things. And then sometimes we can do it because we don't want to feel alone. We may rush into it because of that, we don't want to lose the person because we want to, be able to tell them that. But when we take the time to build a healthy connection, that's when we create a space where we can reveal these more private things without rushing into it. And we can also develop a safe environment so that we can tell our partner about those things. And when you take your time and allow yourself to learn someone and to observe them, and then also more importantly, to notice how they respond to the small things, it allows us to build that trust to tell them the big things, right? Yeah. So in this time, I know you may be finding yourself asking, when is the right time? Like I said, that timing piece. But what you should be asking in this moment really is, has this relationship shown me that it can hold this? Because when we're building a relationship, we often focus on being open with people. But it's just as important, if not more so, to know that we will be supported and then ultimately safe in that relationship. Making sure that we're taking time to go through those stages of bonding. And if you need a refresher, you can go back to that episode on attachment and the relationship attachment model and look at, are we getting to know the person so that we know that they can be that support for us? Have we built that trust with them? Do we know that we can rely on them when we tell them this thing, this very important thing about ourselves? And even if we also need to know that there's a commitment to the relationship before we divulge these things too. And then we have to make sure that the intimacy level has been supported from the previous areas of bonding. So we just want to make sure that we have those things in place. Um, and timing is very important, but also safety in these situations is also important. And we got to know that the relationship can support being able to share those things with them. So, again, I hope that answer helps you to kind of navigate that situation. And if not, like I said, have a support person and have to kind of bounce that stuff off. God did not make us to walk through this life alone. So we're surrounded by people, but we also got to know the people who we are surrounding ourselves with and know that they are people that will truly hold on to the things that we are giving them. and that they have the capacity to. We got to know that they have the capacity to hold it. All right. Our next question is, why do I sometimes experience suicidal thoughts even when I feel okay or happy? This is one of those questions that people don't always say out loud, but they feel it. And when it happens, it can be confusing and even scary because you start to think, I'm okay. Like I've been okay for a while. So why is this feeling showing up? And here's what I want to gently offer to you. Not all thoughts reflect what you want. And when I say that, I'm saying that some thought reflect what your mind is trying to process. And if that even confuses you, we have something called intrusive thoughts. These are the thoughts that sometimes are triggered by our experiences, but they are also sometimes come out of nowhere. And they can come when we're feeling okay, because sometimes it's a deeper feeling or a deeper thing that is signaling to you that there's something that you need to pay attention to. And sometimes it can also be a response to what you've experienced in the past. Um, I think I've mentioned this book before, The Body Keeps Score. So when we've experienced a traumatic experience, or when we've been in a space where we've experienced a lot of stress, sometimes those feelings can come back even when we're okay because our body's so used to it. So it's important for us to check in with ourselves so that we can be able to notice when those things are happening. This is also where self care becomes more than just a surface practice, not just taking bubble baths and all that stuff. It also becomes a time where, if you have engaged in therapy before, it's a time for you to re engage in that. If you're someone who enjoys journaling, it's a time for you to engage in that. It becomes asking yourself, what am I carrying and what do I need in this moment? And one tool that I often use for that is the HALT. So that's HALT. That's, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I anxious? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Because sometimes just pausing and checking in with those areas can help you identify what your body or your mind is asking for. And sometimes, like I said, it's not even about what's happening around you, it's about how your brain is functioning. Because certain chemicals like serotonin, those are the ones that help regulate our mood and slow things down. So when that system isn't working strongly, the thoughts can move faster and sometimes in directions that you didn't expect. So again, they look like those intrusive thoughts that show up, even when we seem okay on the outside. And for some people, it's also connected to how they're wired. Genetics and stress those stress responses can play a role. If this is something that you experience, I want to just encourage you and let you know that this is not a character flaw. It's not a check against you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just something that's happening in your brain, and it's something that you can get support around. If thoughts like this keep showing up and it gets to a point where they are too big, and then you start to want to act on them because they are continuing, I want you to know that there are resources available. 988 is a resource that is available. You can also call GCAL in Georgia, I'll tell you that. In Georgia, we have the Georgia Crisis and Access Line, and that allows when you feel like you're in crisis, that line helps you to get the resources that you need. There's also You can also reach out to a friend or reach out to some trusted individual, whether it be a pastor, like a counselor or somebody. Make sure that you do that because you don't have to carry these thoughts and these things alone. There are people that can support you, and reaching out support is I know sometimes people don't want to burden people with what they have going on, but reaching out for support is the strongest thing that you can do in these moments. Um, reaching out for support is part of caring for yourself. It shouldn't be used as a last resort, but a step towards safety. So, like I said, I'm gonna encourage you guys all the way through this in letting you know that there's help out there. There's support out there. Okay, so we are at our last question. And it is, how do I begin healing from trauma? And how do I know if something from my past is still affecting me today? Okay, so I'm glad that we're ending on this question because I feel like it brings everything full circle. Because sometimes what we experience today is connected to something we haven't fully processed, like I said before. And it doesn't always show up as a clear memory. Sometimes it shows up as a strong emotional reaction, repeating patterns, difficulty feeling safe, and then also triggers that we can't really understand. And often that's the clue. That is the clue to when we need a little help or a little more help with processing and healing from our past trauma. That is the clue. It's not just asking what happened to me, but asking, why does this keep showing up? Because healing doesn't always begin with going back. Sometimes it begins with noticing what's happening right now and choosing to respond differently to it. And healing isn't about erasing your past, it's about understanding it. Because when we understand what has happened to us, we can make better decisions going forward, but then we also regain our control over the things that have happened to us. I want to encourage you um, right now in this moment to take some time to kind of reflect on those. Like, why does this keep showing up? Have I allowed myself to process what has happened to me? Because I like to give the example of a floating beach ball in a pool. And sometimes when we don't process or give space to the things that we've experienced, they can come back just like a beach ball in the pool. I know if you're like me, when you're in the pool and you're having a good time and then you let this beach ball go away, then next thing you know, you feel something cold on your back and it's that beach ball touching you again because the waves of the water have brought it back to you. And that's kind of how trauma is. That's how anxiety also is too. The things that we don't process, the things that we don't give space for to understand are the things that come back when we least expect it. So I want to encourage you guys to ask that question and again, seek help. If you need help processing that, there are many ways that we can process these things. And sometimes we just need somebody else to walk us through that. All right. So as we bring this conversation to a close, I want you to take a moment to sit with this or sit with these questions, the questions for your questions, which are, what have I been calling just me that might actually be a pattern that I have been carrying for a while? Where in my life am I reacting instead of responding? And what would it look like to approach myself with curiosity instead of judgment to answer some of these questions? Now, you don't have to answer them today, but start by just familiarizing yourself with how you feel and how you've been feeling so that you can either answer these questions or take that step to invite someone in to walk alongside you to be able to answer those questions. And as I close, I want you to continue to reflect on those questions, and I want to leave you with this. If you are struggling with any of the things that we talked about today, please consider seeking support from a licensed mental health professional. And if you don't want to do one-on-one stuff, they have groups that also can help you with these certain things. It depends on what you need, but I want you to know that you don't have to figure this out on your own. There are people who are trained to support you, to guide you, and to help you navigate what you are experiencing. And if you find yourself in a moment of crisis, you can call or text 988 to to connect with the Suicide Crisis Lifeline. Support is available, guys. Support is available. I want to also thank you for taking time to slow down and reflect with me today. This work, this awareness is not always easy, but it's meaningful because every time you pause and take a moment to understand yourself, you create the opportunity to choose something different. And that is where we begin to grow. That's where we begin to heal. So I want you to take what you need from this episode and leave what you don't and pass on to others that may need it too. And as always, I want you to stay mindful. Thank you for listening to Stay Mindful with Dr. Evelyn Davis. You can follow the podcast on Podbean, Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And if today's episode helped you, leave a review or share it with someone who could use it. Until next time, stay mindful.